Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for participating. I hope you find it educational, entertaining, maybe a little funny tonight. Module 5, which is this evening, it's called the answer key. And what I mean by that, what I'm thinking of when I wrote that, is how to figure things out when it's not clear what's going on. That's the big idea. And troubleshooting when your child hits a pothole. That means your child is having difficulty in school, with their friends, socially, whatever. And what I'd love to help you with is to give you some tools and things to think about when and if this happens. Okay, I want to again thank Michael and Estelle Stein. Thank you so much for sponsoring this series. Um, Last week I said that I've been thinking about doing this for 10 years. Michael's actually been asking me to do it for 20 years, just for the record. So thank you, Michael. Thank you for your push. So just to give you an idea what we're talking about, um, I'm sort of like the guy in the emergency room, in the triage center. Um, Besides for my day job, people tend to reach out. Unfortunately, now I don't have the amount of spare time that I used to. I try to do my best to respond to people who call me, but basically for 30 years, I've been taking phone calls from people, emails, chats, whatever, and they're asking me to help them with their children. Typically, I don't know the kids. I don't know the parents. I don't know the schools they're talking about. So I'm obviously at a tremendous disadvantage in trying to figure out. I would love to help the people. People are in pain. They're having difficulty with a child. I think I mentioned in one of the earlier classes, a very wise woman told me that you're never, she said, a parent is never happier than their unhappiest child. So, people are in pain and I'd love to help. So I've kind of trained myself to listen carefully and to try to pick up patterns. And I'd like to share that with you tonight about how to be able to do this on your own and to be able to problem solve. I call it, when you hit a pothole. That's the title. But it means when things aren't working right, some of the things that I'm going to encourage you to look into. Tonight, we're going to open with a case study, which is an actual story. A Hasidic fellow, a couple from Borough Park called me years and years ago. They got my wife, which is a good way to shortcut, to get to me right away. If you get her to say yes, So I came home and she said that this couple was calling, and they had a terrible crisis, that their son had been refusing to go to yeshiva for a number of weeks. What happened was he started ninth grade. I called them after dinner. I asked the wife to call, to find the time when we can all talk with both parents. And I started to explore a bit. What happened was he failed 3 Gemara tests, and in a row, in other words, Rebbe gave a test. Rebbe gave him a retest and a third retest, and he failed all of them. By that time, he was never so frustrated. Sadly, he was so frustrated that he said, "I'm never going to school again, and you can punish me, you can do whatever you want. I'm not going back there again." It was too painful for him. And his parents, certainly initially, they just, they were grasping at straws. They said, "Listen, don't think you're staying home to play. If you stay home, you're going to sit on your bed." So he sat on his bed. He said, "I'll sit on my bed for the rest of the year. I'm not leaving." And the parent, anyway. So I'm going to explore. I'm going to use this as an example of something. Again, I don't know the child. I don't know the parents. I don't know the school they're talking about. It was a prominent Hasidic boys' school in Borough Park, but I knew nothing about it. And I'm going to talk about how this worked and some of the things that emerged from it. And again, I hope there'll be a pattern that you'll be able to really come away with some practical tips, as we did previously in the previous sessions. And the survey we did 2 weeks ago certainly indicated that everybody was in favor of this, the way we had set it up. If there's anything that you're not sure what I said, if you're missing clarity, like what exactly did you mean by that? What do you mean by an answer key? What does that mean? After I say something, if you just don't understand it, flash your hand. There's a digital hand you can wave if you go to the settings, or you can wave your hand back and forth, and our dear friend Chesky in the control room will unmute you, and I'm going to just try to do it quickly because I really want to get to the presentation, but I'll certainly redo what we spoke about, and then we'll take it during Q&A later on. Now, the reason I call this the answer key, life has taught me that there's always an answer key. Things don't happen randomly. Now, what's difficult as parents to find out what that is. So that's what we're going to talk about. But I really believe in my heart of hearts, there's always an answer key, always. Following the answer key, I'm going to use my cursor here to just, okay, finding the answer key isn't easy. But if you follow these pointers, it will greatly increase your odds of finding it. Okay, so this is what I'm encouraging you to do, sort of like a checklist. If and when, you know, one of your children starts acting out, or you just see things that don't make sense. So here's my pointers. Talk less and listen more. Rather than just giving them a speech, like let's take this kid for example. You don't have cheshik, how come you're not learning? Why is this, you know? So that would be something that, you know, that would be fair to, you know, people would do. You know, you say, hey, how come you're not learning? But you don't know what's going on right now. The child you didn't explain, you don't have an answer key. So really listen more. Ask open-ended questions that might get you more information rather than you speaking first. And we understand you're frustrated, you're in pain. I get it. I've been there too. We all have. But this is a good pointer. Talk less and listen more. Encourage them to say, they might not want to say it the first time. That doesn't mean you don't try again in a different way. Don't give up until you figure it out. Like, just be tenacious and try to explore every possibility and think of things you haven't thought of, and, you know, reach out for people that might be able to help you. Certainly, if they're, you know, part of the answer key, eventually might turn out to be a professional educational evaluation where you know, a professional, either a lot of school districts do it for free. You should find out about that. So sometimes you need to do this professionally and find out. I don't expect any of you to be experts in learning disabilities or what else is going on. Sometimes it requires that, but sometimes it's just, you know, a deeper understanding of what's going on and getting your child comfortable to talk about it. Be patient. Be patient. You know, we're all under stress with this whole COVID thing, and with everything flaring up again, that's not making it any better. But I really encourage parents, especially younger parents that your oldest child is getting into tween years and teen years. Please, you know, we're stressed out with parnasa, we're stressed out with livelihood, you know, and other areas of our life. Try to do what you can to create a safe space around your child, and try to see to it that you're patient when they need you to be patient, which is always, but especially when they're having difficulty. I was just on a personal level. When we moved to Muncie 32 years ago, I was already in Yeshiva Spring Valley. I taught 8th grade, and in the afternoon, I was first a teacher and then an English principal at Beis Mikra, which was a yeshiva a different yeshiva about a mile away from the house. And, you know, basically I was on from 7:30 till 5:30. And I used to park my car at home. I would drive home from Yeshiva Spring Valley, park the car in the driveway, walk to Beis Mikra, which was a full mile, because I needed downtime before I got to my house. I saw myself that I just needed, it was too much. I needed some space. before I came home, we had Kanena Hara 4 preteens and teens then. And I just found that that space, what happened was one time I didn't have a car. And, I wound up walking home and I found myself, I was self-aware enough to know that I came in a different person, not and rather than a 2-minute drive and jump right into 4 kids in the middle of dinner and all of that. So I asked my wife permission if I can come back 15 minutes later. She saw very quickly that this was a good idea. She saw the results. So she was all good with that. So please try to be patient, especially when your children are suffering and not doing well. Your attitude really matters. This is another thing that I did in my classrooms and tried to do in my personal life is not to seek intervention, whether it's discipline or giving them a speech or whatever, until you find the answer key. And I propose to you, would a doctor operate without an X-ray or CAT scan? So if you see your child acting out, let's go back to this case study because we're going to refer to it. We're going to refer to it right away. If the father speaks to the kid and tells him how important Gemara is, let's say, and how people were, but the father could sit down and say, your grandfather went through the Holocaust and he only wanted was from, and whoa, and this kid's not feeling happy in the first place. You don't know what happened. So just lay off, because in all likelihood, until you have that answer key, it's not likely that you're going to do anything that's meaningful and helpful. You're probably going to exacerbate things. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't need to work on, a plan until the plan, but I really encourage you to try to keep these thoughts. Talk less and listen more. Don't give up. Be patient. Your attitude matters. And don't do anything in terms of intervention until you figure out what's going on. And think of the doctor. Again, if someone comes in pain, he's not going to take his spleen out right away. They're going to find out what's going on. So try to get information before you go on. One more thing, and tonight and next Tuesday, I view the first 4 sessions as really prepping for this. I laid them out in a sequence for a reason. The tools that I hope, we have been helpful in terms of understanding adolescence and what to expect in terms of the frontal lobe and in front of how they're thinking and how they behave, and that certain things here's where the rubber meets the road. We're going to talk about these 2 types. Tonight is going to be mostly about educational things, and tomorrow is going to be, next Tuesday, is going to be more about social emotional things and things of that nature. This is a Yankee, no research. This is just me. Parents whose kids make it, I've noticed this a long time ago, and there really are. I wouldn't say it's foolproof, but usually I meet couples for 5-10 minutes. I can usually tell you if the kid's going to make it out to the other side. And I for many years I didn't say this in public, and then I realized I should share my feelings. You don't have to agree or you could agree or disagree, but this is what I found, that there are attributes of families that the parents do things that greatly increase the likelihood that the kids are going to make it. Again, these are my personal observations, nobody else's. And what it really looks like is when parents come in and they talk about I'm going through these things. They sit down and they say, look, Rabbi Horowitz, we're having an issue with our teenager, and we're working on it as a family. Even if they don't say those words, it sounds different than our first 2 kids are wonderful, and this one, that's the reverse of that. Our other kids are great, and when this kid goes away for Shabbos, it's such a different home. Again, chas v'shalom, I'm not blaming anyone, and I'm not casting aspersions on anyone. I'm just saying that when that happens, I cringe on the inside, because that's not a recipe for success. It's much more helpful when you think of it collaboratively. We are having an issue, and we want to know. Tell us what to do. Help us. We would love to. We want to make it work. Okay, they aren't rigid, bottom left, parents who are flexible. When I say rigid, meaning that my child has to go to this school, or I expect my child to do this. Um, the nature of what's going on often requires some movement, to do things differently than you planned. Um, so parents that are flexible have a much, much better chance of getting through those. So now this does not mean that it becomes easy. It's a long, long road if you have a child that has real difficulty. But these are the attributes that I found. Reach out for help and keep looking until you find it. Just like thinking of the answer key, just keep at it and don't get discouraged. And someone in Eretz Yisrael is helping me with. Just had a conversation 2 days ago. Someone in Eretz Yisrael is helping me with one of my projects, and he told me rather apologetically that my wife said that she heard I was talking to you. She asked if you could please meet with us on Zoom. So I said sure. When we got on, it was Monday morning, Monday midday, my time. It was nighttime by them. She apologized for doing this, for using his connection with me or whatever. And I took out this slide that I had prepared already, and I showed her this thing. I circled this. I said, you see, keep looking until you find it. I said, that's an attribute for success. If you're just determined to get help, I'm not saying I'm the best person to help them, but being that she thought so, she was just determined to do it. Here's the most important one, folks. This is the most important one of all. Determined to do what's right for your child and ignore what everybody else says. And that is so much easier said than done. It's so much easier said than done. But usually if you need to do something differently than the other people, everybody's going to start giving you advice and telling you what you should or shouldn't be doing. If you feel it's right, if the people you're consulting with feel that it's right, just close an eye. Just close an eye. It's just, you follow your instincts. I didn't write it because it sounds a little harsh. And again, I'm very cognizant of the fact that people who are in pain are in pain. But I've been telling parents for at least 15 years that if you're making poor decisions because you're worried about what the neighbors are going to say, or you're embarrassed, and again, it's understandable that you would be, the likelihood is that you'll wind up being much more embarrassed for much bigger things later on. In other words, if your kid goes to a yeshivish place and everybody's wearing a hat and jacket, and your son is rebelling against it and says, look, do you think God cares if I wear a jacket? We'll talk about some of that stuff next week, And you talk things over with people and you say, look, this is not the issue right now. Your son has a learning disability. He's got something else. Leave him alone. Work it out with the school. If not, find the school. Perhaps even find the school. And then, what are you doing? How can you letting him do it? My mother, Allah Shalom, my father died when I was 3, and my mother always said that in addition to the pain and the loneliness, of losing your husband and being alone and terrified and all of that, she said, when I didn't have a problem, I was just, until my husband died, I was just a housewife, I was a private citizen. Once my husband died, everybody had something to say. Then I became in the public domain, and they were well-meaning people, but so I'm saying it's a very hard thing to do. I really encourage you to do it. And now I'm going to run through this stuff. This is my introduction is over. Let's get going. So the 2 things that I want to talk about in terms of the answer key. Tonight we're going to be talking about personality learning profiles. That's module 5. And next week I'm going to be talking about Maslow, not only, but about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'll just go through it quickly because some of the things tonight might be a little bit relevant to this, but Abraham Maslow has this theory about human development. Anybody, again, feel free to Google it. I encourage you to look it up and see. And Abraham Maslow says that people have 5 needs, 5 sets of needs. And his chiddush, his original idea is that he said that these were sequential. So if you're missing the lowest level, which is food and shelter and, the basic needs, you can't get to the next level, which is safety and love and belonging. Now, these five needs, the bottom one has to be met for the next one to be met. So look at that, you have food and sleep. So if you haven't slept in 3 days, you just can't think of anything but getting into a bed. If Hurricane Sandy comes and you don't have electricity, and your best friend calls up, that would be 3. You're not interested in taking the call. So, and then self-esteem and self-actualization means the stein. We're going to study this really carefully next week and talk about a lot of the developments and how it goes. But for now, I want to talk about personality profiles, how it works, how it's relevant, and how you could make a big difference. So back to our case study. Again, Yankee Horowitz is sitting at home. I speak to the parents, and I just hear that he's sitting on his bed. I don't know what's going on. Now, I gave these tips, right? Talk less, listen more. I wrote here. That goes for me too, right? I mean, Yankee Horowitz has got us on. Chesky, I'm glad you got a good laugh out of that one. Thank you. That means Yankee too, not just you guys. It means I got to be quiet and really, really listen. And that's why it's a case study, because I'm going to shut. It so happens that I did listen this time, but this is what it looks like. Just instead of telling them, well, actually, I think, it might be, just listen. You don't know anything yet. And don't give up till you figure it out. Okay? So here was my initial conversation with the father. So with the parents, actually. So I said, tell me, they said that their son refused to go back to yeshiva. Now, it turns out that the things that we would have said is his Rebbe is not caring, or is just busy giving out tests and failing kids. It so happens the Rebbe volunteered on his own time without money to learn the Gemara over with this kid. Okay? So he had a great Rebbe, and the story behind those 3 tests was he failed the first test. Rebbe offered to learn it with him again. Rebbe learned the entire Gemara, and he failed it again. And then he did it the 3rd time, and by then he got his hopes up high. It was so painful that he just shut down. Now, here's what I asked him. Tell me, what words did he use? So the father says, he spoke silliness, like he didn't mean it in a negative way. I mean, I couldn't make heads or tails out of what he was saying. So I said, please tell me the exact words that he used. Remember this? I got to listen now, right? I got to listen. I just got to listen. He told me it's Narishkeit. He did not say it negatively. He just said, I didn't understand what he was saying. So I continue to probe gently. Please tell me what he said. Do you remember what he said? No, I just remember, we were so upset and he's talking never. I let him finish. And then I said, tell me what he said. He says, yeah, this is what he said. I mean, it really happened just like this. He says, Manzinat Gezuk, my son said, Ich darf nicht nachamu. I don't need to learn it again. The father said, you have such a good Rebbe, he learned it with you again. Why do you keep failing? So the kid said, Ich darf nicht nachamu. I don't need another time. Ich darf anders. I need it differently. He said, I need it differently. He's not giving me what I need. He's a wonderful Rebbe. But what does it help me if he does the same thing again? It didn't work the first time. And I said, and how did you respond? And never. I felt so bad for the guy. He really was. They were great parents. They did everything else right, They reached out. They tried for help. They were turning over. I wasn't the first person they spoke to. So I asked him, what'd you do? So he was crying. He said, I'm sure it was a terrible thing to do. I didn't mean it. But he said, I took the Gemara. I had a Gemara there, and I turned it sideways. Like, what do you mean different? The Gemara is Gemara. Like, what are you supposed to do? Now, this kid was so self-aware. The next thing he said, I said, anything else he said? He says, yeah. He says, als Werte. It's all words. So the father said, like, duh. No, he didn't do the Valley Girl. No. He said, like, Werte, that's what Gemara is. Like, what are you talking about? Now, it turns out that we know there are different learning patterns. To this day, I regret not interviewing that kid. He's probably in his 30s now. I hope he's doing well. He was so self-aware, remarkable. The kid didn't go to a master's class in education. but he was so self-aware that he pinned it. Now, we have these learners, and here's where we start educating. Here where I'm starting to really give you tools to start looking at things when you see things that you can't figure out. Like, why is my son, who really likes yeshiva, the 6th grade Rebbe, there are 4 tracks in the yeshiva, there are 4 6th grade Rebbeim. I begged the principal to give my son this particular Rebbe because our oldest son had him and it was the best year of his life. And it's a disaster. Let's try to figure this out. Things like this hopefully could help you. So there are textual learners that learn best by reading. There are auditory learners that learn best by hearing and listening. And visual learners learn best by seeing graphs, charts, pictures. And if you notice, I try to always do visual things. You see this here, right? That's for the auditory, right? And this is a text, and this is a visual learner. The research shows that this stuff helps. You remember things, sometimes more than the text. Depending on the study, somewhere between 65 and 70% of people learn best visually. And especially certain things like Gemara or Chumash, that's just text, leaves a gap, okay? So what the kid was saying says als Wörter, it's all words. He's obviously a visual learner. And he couldn't make sense. That's why I was blown away that he was so self-aware, okay? Now, which one are you? So here's a way to tell. I'm going to give you 2 ways. One is you get a new phone. The second that I wrote in parentheses, this is just for the guys really who are in Beis Medrash. Imagine that you're watching people in Kollel, yeshiva, learning, and they're learning a difficult piece of Gemara. So if you're getting a phone, some people read a manual. That's the best thing to do. They just go through the manual. Okay, they take the phone, plug it, then press this, do that. Some people, they just need a friend. Hey, come on, you know this already. Could you help me out? Just tell me what to do. And other people just watch a video. Now, they're totally different. But we know that people, you can see it anecdotally if you go around looking, but the research clearly indicates that people have a preference. That's why, for example, if you watch a weatherman, a weather person, okay? If you watch somebody doing the weather and you see, they say, okay, Muncie is going down to 44 degrees tonight. Now, he said it, you heard it, right? They still have a number 44 there, and they'll have a chart showing how the temperature is going during the day. They'll have a picture of a sun, or you see, brrr, why do they do that? Because they want everybody to tune in again. And what? Chesky, what?
You have a few hands.
What'd you say?
You have a few hands.
Oh, a few hands. Okay, let me finish this, and I'll be glad to. Okay. So again, you read the manual. A friend reads it to you. You watch a video. Those are 3 different ways of absorbing information. We all tend to. Some people may not, but most people have a preference. The parentheses is something fascinating that I observed. This is a Yankee, not a research thing, but if you look when people, and sometimes you might have this with a math problem or something that you're trying to memorize for a test. If you're in school, if you're in a graduate program, whatever, you're in college. So you see, people respond. I encourage everyone, guys, look around at the Beis Medrash next time. I hope you'll get a ding and say, hey, that's what Horowitz was talking about. Now you watch some people, when the Gemara is easy, when the Talmud is easy, it's not a big deal. But when it gets difficult, you'll see some people do this. They say, they try to crowd out the sound and they just read the text several times. And what they're doing is they're textual learners. So the best way they learn is by reading. His chavrusa, his study partner who's reading the Gemara to him, is distracting him from doing what he does best. Okay? Other people literally do this. Why? Again, watch. They'll go like this and say, could you say that to me again, please? And they close their eyes to remove that distraction. and try to absorb it orally. And other people will just sit there and try to graph out the Gemara or take notes or write something that they could see so that it presents to them. So again, this is what's going through my mind when I heard the child say, he says, Als Werte, it's all words. So the textual and auditory wasn't working for him. He needed a visual learner. Again, he was incredibly self-aware. The text wasn't working for him. And he knew somehow that he needed it differently, and the Rebbe was just learning the text with him again, hence his frustration. I'll take a couple of hands quickly.
Okay. We have Aviva Minster.
Go ahead, please.
Aviva, unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi. I just really wanted to add something quickly. It's because I think this is very powerful, but there are also kids today who I think now we understand who also need a kinesthetic model.
Kinesthetic, I was going to say, I figured, I didn't want to interrupt you. I was going to say that. Very, thank you for pointing that out.
You know, and that's really what makes the greatest impression, I think, on kids is when they're able to actually, when they have that tactile experience.
Right, exactly.
Or,
I purposely didn't. I didn't mention it because I didn't. It's a lot of information. If people are not familiar with this, I didn't want to overwhelm them. There are other. What's your name, please?
Aviva Minster.
Aviva very correctly said there are other ways of experiencing learning. Sometimes with math, let's say they have manipulatives. So that's another way of like shaping, getting information. Some people learn best by experiencing it, yet others, for example, I had a few Rabbeim in our yeshiva that used to, for example, would take the Chumash and make a play out of it. So Yosef there with his brothers, Rebbe would get 10 kids, 10 students of his, everybody would be a different person, and they would experience the whole learning in that way. So that's also just another creative way. Thank you, Aviva. Anybody else?
Yeah, we have Siri.
Yeah, hi. I hope it's okay if I push back a little bit. I know that you keep encouraging us to push back.
Absolutely.
But actually, most recently in the last 3-4 years, and I only know this from the educator side,
Please.
More than the parent side, but that actually all the research that's been done in the last 3 or 4 years has actually disproven the theory of learning styles and Gardner's ideas behind it. And what actually most of the recent studies, and Daniel Willingham is one of the big proponents of this, he says it actually can encourage a fixed mindset in a student because they think I'm only good at when you box children by this is my style and then try to only cater towards that one way of learning, and that what they found in many studies that's been replicated quite a number of times, and there's like a lot of articles that are readily available online that talk about this in depth, that really the content has to drive the best modality, and that it's a matter of finding points of engagement much more than catering to a specific learning style.
Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing it out. And you're the one who has been helping me out with the Zoom, right?
Yes.
Thank you. She's my Zoom Rebbitzin. Thank you, Terry. She was helping me out back when I was a beginner. Thank you for pointing it out. I've seen some of the literature on that. What we're talking about in this case, and thank you for it helps me clarify what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that we should pigeonhole children only into doing one thing. What I'm suggesting is when we come and see that a child is not learning in a certain way, I'm encouraging parents to think about presenting the information a different way. Not to say that, don't bother reading the text anymore. You should only to make them dependent on the style they're doing. What I'm saying is people who are not familiar with these learning patterns and see a child struggling, if a child, let's say, for example, is taking a test and failing every test, one of our children did this, that child got perfect grades or near perfect grades when they were able to respond orally and go back and without writing it down. So what I'm saying is, I'm not suggesting, I'm not going to get into, let's put it this way, the different paths, and that should you should you therefore tell them, look, this is what you do well, forget the other stuff? I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying that people should be looking for this concept, for looking for other ways of learning. That's all I'm saying. If a child in yeshiva is only getting those two types of text, listening or writing, there's ways that you can do visual tools to help them out. Okay, so thank you very much. I very much appreciate you bringing it up. Okay, so again, back to the kid. We know that the child was self-aware and he was able to tell us what he was exactly looking at. And not only is it, what I want to expand upon is not only the educational component, but who we are, how do we work? Now, I picked 4 examples. Are you analytical or emotional, meaning are you rational based or emotional based? Are you in the box or out of the box? There are many different types of personality profiling to help you understand it. This is such powerful stuff, folks. And I don't expect you to, a half hour from now, be expert in personality profiles. And in fact, what Siri was bringing out is also like getting into, I wouldn't say get into the weeds, but this is supposed to give you, I just want to let you know what to look for. That was the idea. So here's one of the ways to look at, and I see this constantly in terms of education, the way a person thinks, even this, I use Excel and Word, that's a Yankee thing. The Microsoft program. So Excel is numbers, rational thinker, and Word is flowery, emotion-based. So one way, I'm going to encourage you to, some of you may have seen this on social media. I posted this, so have a listen, please. If you want to know if you're rational or emotional, have a listen here.
Aviv, it's Friday afternoon and I really need you to clean up your room. So basically, here's the deal. You can either spend...
I'm sorry, Chesky, were you able to hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure. So I'll just get back. Oops.
I would start from the beginning again. Let it
Yeah, that's what I'm going to
a
do.
little bit. Yeah,
Okay.
Let it run a little bit.
It's Friday afternoon and I really need you to clean up your room. So basically, here's the deal. You can either spend 15 minutes arguing with me and then spend 10 minutes cleaning it up, or you could just skip the first part and just clean up for 10 minutes and be done. So what's it going to be, 25 minutes or 10 minutes? You decide. Or, Aviva, you know how hard Mommy worked to make this room so beautiful for you. Do you know what it would mean to her if you cleaned it up on your own? 10 minutes and stop by and tell her, Mom, I saw what you did for my room. I wanted you to see it clean for Shabbos. Okay, so what appealed to you more, the first approach or the second? Was it a rational-based argument, which I call Excel, or was it a more emotional-based argument, which I call Word? The answer to that question of which appealed to you more says a lot about how your brain processes information, what your personality profile is like. And it affects everything. It affects education, it affects your interaction with others.
Okay, folks. Okay, so that's just one example of how we think different, how we process information. Obviously, these aren't the only 2 ways of thinking, but these are just global, like big ideas. What I really want to point out is if you're talking to somebody who's different than you are, or if you're in a classroom where the teacher has a different personality than you do, it might be a very, very long year. And therefore, something like this might explain why that 6th grade Rebbe that you wanted to get, the one thing that I spoke about earlier, that you wanted to get for your son, turns out to be a disaster, even though your oldest son wanted it. So here's how it goes. Again, an emotion-based is Mommy put her heart and soul into making the room for you. That's all emotion. The other side is a logical argument. Listen, you want to knock yourself out? Go for it, man. But just here's how it's going to work. Most couples, folks, in my experience, many or most couples are opposite in how they approach this. So are there any, is anyone out there, I'd like to try something else with you in a moment. Anybody out there found one side of it, like really, someone that's really in the word camp that felt that when I made that appeal to clean up your room, it really, if couples are watching together, I know not all you are, if you're couples and you found very different answers, different responses, that one of you responded one way and the other responded a different way, maybe flag a hand if you're bold enough, and I'll do something else I'll have an interaction with you. Anybody want to volunteer? Any couples, again, if there's a couple that had very different views on how this worked. Anybody? If not, we'll just do it all together.
I don't see any.
Okay, so sure, Josh, is your hand up? Oh, my student here. Go ahead. So who's what? I know you guys, but I'm not going to say it. Go ahead, Yeshua. Yeshua is my 8th grade student. Go ahead. And they're both for parents in our yeshiva. Go ahead.
So, my wife always, Shifki can I guess, speak for herself.
Well,
Go ahead, please.
Definitely more of a word.
I think I'm more of a word person. I'm just not sure if it's a guilt thing when I say, you know, I work so hard to keep your room nice and stuff. Maybe go clean it up. I don't know.
And
if it's a
Yeshua,
guilt thing
Josh?
or something.
I would say, I guess sometime, I would say probably in my own mind, excel, but I guess I try to look at it in terms of who I'm dealing with, how they might respond to it.
Okay, so that's being self-aware. Now, here's what I'm going to do, folks. I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to teach them Hilchas Sukkos. Okay? We're going to talk about Sukkos. And for anybody who can see him, if you're on gallery view, can you make him a speaker? Oh, you can see him now. If he talks, is he visible, Chesky?
Who, Josh?
Yeah.
You can see him, yeah, he's there.
Okay. So here's what I'd like to do, guys, okay? We're gonna talk about Sukkos. Now imagine you're both students in my class, and I am definitely a word person, right? I'm a very emotion-based person. Now, I'm gonna teach some Hilchas Sukkos that is very word, and I'm gonna teach Hilchas Sukkos, things about Sukkah that are very excel. See how you both respond to that. Everybody in the audience, listen. And now, the corollary of this is, if one of them likes some of it and the other one doesn't, realize that their children are gonna be one or the other usually, or a blend. But each person, your kids might, so when you speak to your children like this, so Yeshua, if you said you're Excel and you have a word child and you say 10 minutes or 25 minutes, well, what are you talking about, right? That might not work as well as the other way. So Hilchas Sukkos would sound like this. You know, there was a story from the Mizritcher Maggid that the night before Sukkos, he walked around the whole night with the lulav and the esrog, and he was shaking it. Or another way of saying this is he said, you know what Sukkos is? Sukkos is the only mitzvah all year that surrounds you. It's almost like Hashem is hugging us. Now, that sounds, Mrs. Weisberg, how are we doing?
I'm good. I'm still here. I haven't zoned out yet.
No. You know, and the other way is someone jumps into an explanation. The Hadassim are supposed to be, it's either 12 inches or 11 and a half. It's a machlokes between Rav
So
Moshe
you lost me there.
Okay, here you go, okay? So, Josh, if you're a word person, that very much appealed to you. You love this story that I told about, you know, how chashuv it was to the Rav, and he sat all night waiting, anticipating the morning, or Sukkot, what it embraces us. And a word person, Excel person, just tell me the halachas. What do you? I don't need all this stuff. Okay. It goes. Word people want to know, why should I do this? Excel people want to know, what should I do? Just give me a list. Tell me what I need to do.
So a word person.
Okay, so you're going to, if I'm your teacher, so if I don't inspire you, you're not going to be motivated to do this. And if I do inspire you and I spend 10 minutes doing that, your husband is not, or the other people like that are not going to work. Again, I want you to be aware of that's why you listen to your children. when the child says, I hate class, or I'm not enjoying this, or why am I doing this? Some kids will come home and say, why do I need to learn Gemara? It's pointless. What's the point? They argue with each other all day. That person needs a reason to do it, okay? So again, this is my experience in looking at this. Word people want to know why, Excel want to know what they should do. I did a class in Toronto once on this, teaching the Rabbeim different personality profiles, and it was absolutely fascinating. There was 5 minutes to go. We had a hard stop because everybody had a daven mincha, and 2 hands went up. I said, okay, I only have time for one more question. So 2 Rabbeim who were sitting right next to each other both raised their hands together. I said, look, let me take your questions together because maybe I'll be able to answer them both at the same time. I promise it went just like this. One Rebbe raised his hand and he said, Rabbi Horowitz, how did you think of this? This is amazing. I mean, I'm your age, and you know, how did you get to the? It's amazing. I'm so inspired. Cyril, how you doing? That good. And the Excel Rebbe, the Rebbe sitting right next to him, he said, do me a favor, what am I supposed to do in my class differently tomorrow than I did yesterday? Okay, so so I said, folks, we're done. I said, there you go. Okay, so one of them was totally into the emotional part, and the Excel Rebbe wanted to know what to do. I have a few adorable stories. We're running a little bit late. I'll be glad to do them during Q&A. This story is about a businessman. A person was at my classes at a Pesach program, and he told me that if he would have known the content of this class, he would have made a few $1 million, and a deal broke up because he had no idea what was going on around him. It was a very, very funny story. If you want to hear it during Q&A, I wanted to finish the presentation, I'll be glad to do it. This was something that happened with me, my wonderful, amazing wife. She's my best friend in the world. I thank Hashem every day for sending her my way, or sending me her way. She's like organized, Excel, you know, she has a wonderful heart, but that's the way her mind works. So I promise this is true. She said, Yankee, I got you something that's going to change your life. And what was it? And she brought these coasters and put it down. And she says, Yankee, this is going to, you know, because I have these drinks that I just put down. She's not watching. Just put it down on the table. So like to her, it was hysterical. I happened to have been working on a personality profiling thing while I was doing this. So, you know, this was something that my wife thought was amazing. And to me, it's just cluttering up my desk, and I have another thing that's messing up my desk. Okay. This is a fantastic story about something that happened in a snowstorm. I'll be glad to do that later also. So let's just go over. I want to finish some things and then we'll take questions. Now, again, I hope that I'm taking some steps on a journey and getting you to think about, I want you to get away from binary thinking. Binary is like bicycle, bi is 2. So 2 wheels is a bicycle. Bifocals, you know, for guys my age. So bi is 2. So binary thinking is you say, well, the kid either likes learning or doesn't like learning. He's a good student or he's not a good student. It's working, you know, get away from that and start thinking about other possibilities. So here are 4, we just did Excel and Word, you know, analytical emotion. Do you color inside the lines or are you out of the box? How do you work? How do you process? You know, if you're given an instruction, is the first thing you think, how do I get out of this? Can I do this differently? Are you a starter or a closer? If somebody comes, are you happiest if somebody just gives you a list and tells you what to do, or that bores you to death and you just love a new idea? You like starting something. Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Here are 4 things that color your personality. And again, all of this makes up who you are. Now, if you remember, I believe it was at the first class during Q&A, we were talking about, I mentioned to you that I spent time in the kindergarten, the beginning of the year, to see, and I said I can usually tell by the end of the first day or 20 minutes into class who's not going to have their homework in 6th grade, because you watch the kids unpack. these personalities you really can see at a very, very young age. If they're following rules, if they're breaking out, and if you have an out of the, by the way, some of the best Rabbeim are out of the box people, because they very often they're motivated like me, because school was miserable for me, and it was. I'm not blaming anyone else. You know, I wouldn't do well in school at 61. So I'm just saying it's, but again, this personality package, if you have an in the box thinker, there might be conflict in terms of the discussions. So one or two more things. Credit card companies. Oh my God, I studied this over 20 years ago. I actually interviewed the head of a company that was a data collection. They're so much more sophisticated today with internet and all of this, but they know everything about you. You want to know who knows about you? You want to know your own personality profile? Save some time, get into their records and find out what they know. And what do? They check up. When do you pick up your shirts? They have algorithms for this. If you pick up, Bailey, you're smiling. When do you pick up your shirts? I'm sorry? What'd you say?
We don't send any shirts out to the laundry. We do them all at home.
Oh boy, good for you. Let me tell my wife. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if you pick up your shirts Thursday at 4 o'clock, so if there's a charge on your credit card at between 4 and 5 o'clock for the shirts every Thursday, I know who you are. Okay, the credit card company knows who you are. Do you get bargains? Do you have charges at Evergreen or ShopRite or whatever? Do you go shopping the same time every week? But worse, a much better indicator is there a bill at ShopRite for $130, and then 10 minutes later there's a bill for $8, and 2 minutes after that there's a bill for $2. What does that mean, folks? No list, right? So they know everything about you, everything. And I said, how do you think they use that information? I sit in kindergarten class to figure this out. So what they do is they target ads to you now. If you look at if you have a good friend or spouse or anybody else take your phone and compare the ads that come in, you'll see that you're getting different ads. This is an ad for mileage. Who would want to, for a car? I couldn't find any recent ones because gas wasn't that expensive in the 70s. It was crazy. So this is an Excel version of why you should buy a car. This tells you nothing about the car. It's an emotional appeal. So the credit card companies are going to direct information towards you. This was a profiling test that I took. And there are many. This one happened to peg me unbelievably well. Unfortunately, the company's out of business. That Y is Yankee. These 4 domains are, you see, synthesizer, interactor. This is personal, how you interact with people. Synthesizer is how you pull different things together. Analyzer means they have the patience to sit and analyze things deeply. And concluder means the finished thing, whatever. This is my profile. This is my wife, Udi's. Okay, so the red means that it stresses her brain. You see on the right side, on the left side, predominant, preferred, select. Okay, so this means that the area that I'm best in, finds painful. Okay, and you see what she's strong at. During Q&A, I'll tell you a nice word on Ezer Kenegdo. It's my own thought. What says Hashem created Chava to be an Ezer of. Ask me, I'll be glad to share the thought with you. But you see. I believe, by the way, that this is Hashem's plan to make us better people, because we're born selfish. Like I said, you go through adolescence. Now you have to learn to get along with someone whose personality is so different than yours. I also think that you have, by the way, every department head in my yeshiva had my wife's learning profile. Every single one. The Hebrew principal, the English principal, the business manager, all had her personality. Why? Because I have one of me already, right? So this was just something that I was exploring. Now, when you see this stuff, these are my study tips. I cannot tell you how accurate this is. I cannot tell you, you'll go, when your mind is wandering, take a break. Okay? This, you know me, look at the top line. Being creative and thinking out of the box is what you love to do most. This is so accurate. Look at this one. Since you have difficulty memorizing disparate facts, that means if I find things that are random, I can't memorize it. Yeshua, you remember anything about my memory that comes to mind?
Anything about your
His memory?
1 Nelson Road, how's that?
Yes, that's correct.
I used to know all my Talmidim's address. That's his address.
Right.
Is it 1 Nelson? Did I get it right?
Yes.
How many years has it been? Okay, so I used to do a telephone for hairs in class. I used to, instead of, and addresses, just to throw the kids off, I would call, okay, 1 Nelson, what does Rashi say? You know, so it was cute. It kept the kids moving. Now, I am the worst person in the world in matching those cards. The matching games, they put pictures down and you have to match too. I play with my 3-year-old grandchildren. I'm the worst in the world at it. Why? Because there's no association. There's no reason that card should be there. So I get bored. But Yeshua, I know where he lives because I associate it with him. Look what it says here. You difficulty memorizing facts. You create an associative that helps me remember it. So obviously I have all of this, folks, listen to me. Your kid comes home and can't memorize something and you say, you don't have cheshik, you don't have, there's a story, there's an answer key. Again, all of this, I want to encourage you to think and search when things go. Another way of doing this is a difficult Gemara in Elo Metzias. By the way, kids learn this right out of the gate. I'm not going to do it in detail, but it basically, this is called an imtim tzalomar. Imtim tzalomar means if you will say. What this Gemara basically says is that Chesky tells me, I hear you going to Eretz Yisrael, can you take a package for me? So I say, well, it really depends. This is how this is exactly what's going on in the Gemara, just with different words. So Chesky says, here's the question, can you take my package? So I say, well, it really depends. If I go with United, I'm a frequent flyer, I get 3 bags, I'll take anything you want. But if I go with Delta, then I can't. And even if I go with United, if my sister-in-law wants to send me a package, she won't be able to. Shia, how am I doing with the Gemara? Follow the case, okay? And if this were, and even if I go with United and my sister-in-law doesn't send something, my back's been bothering me, so I won't be able to take something. The kids are supposed to follow this linearly, just with text, with no punctuation and no commas or apostrophes. Here's what it sounds like. Was the halacha that Rav Shimon ben Elazar said that you're allowed to keep a lost object wasn't talking in a city that's mostly Gentiles, but if mostly Jews, you're not allowed to keep it. Or maybe he was talking even the same thing, but if it's all Jews. And even if he's going to say it's Rav Yisrael, do the Rabbanan argue or don't they argue? And if you're going to say, is your head spinning? Mine is. Okay? This is for 10-year-old kids, folks. Okay? If they argue by Rav Yisrael, do they? Okay? So here's what I used to do in my class. Do you remember this, Yeshua? I used to teach the kids. There was no Darchinom when you were in my school. I used to teach the kids how to make these telemarketers. You know, they have those scripts because this exactly mimics the way the Gemara works. Hi, our dinner's in 2 weeks. Did you get the invitation? Yes or no? If they say no, then you say, by the way, everybody who calls you for insurance or to buy stuff, they have a script. If you have 2 people in an office, you don't need this. But if you have 100 people in a call center, they get a piece of paper and they have a map of how the conversation goes. This is exactly the way that Gemara works. So I used to first teach them at the beginning of the year different tricks and tools that they would use later in the year. And then this Gemara follows that pattern. So this is just another way that you could take this information if your child is having difficulty following this. By the way, folks, it's the wrong way. I'm sorry. If you remember this, the kid who says als Werte, it's all words. You know what he means? Take a look, okay? He came home, he said, it's all words, so Dad, it's all words. So this is just one tool of many. I want to encourage you to understand that there are tools that you could use, and there are things that you can do that makes all the difference in the world between a frustrating year and a frustrating experience and a solid educationally a valuable experience, just simply, let's say, by doing a flow chart like this. This is the beginning of the Gemara of Yeshel Amidas. It talks about finding lost objects. This is what the kids learn right at the beginning of the year. Yeah, we're going to stop right after this. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but Yeshel Amidas, this is what the Gemara says. The rule is, I'll give you the backstory, and you see why children, especially Gemara. I'm going to make you an offer now. I do, if any of you are interested, the week after next week, I'll be glad to do a beginner Gemara class that will help you learn Gemara with your children. It'll just, if your kids are having difficulty with Gemara, or if you did, if there's interest, I'll be glad to we'll open up later. You can send it, maybe we'll open to chatting or something to let me know. So, Yeshel Amidas, the rule is if you lose something, if somebody loses an object, the finder can keep it if the person gave up hope of finding it again. This is Yesh Shel Amidas. What happens, this is how a Rebbe would teach it. Great Rebbeim. In other words, if I drop a golf ball, let's talk about stuff that's relevant. I drop a golf ball, Chesky picks it up. And now when I lost the golf ball, it rolled down the street and the bus went over it or drove. I never thought, if I get it, I'm never going to get it back. Now Chesky's on the other side of the street. He picks it up. I was miyayish. I gave up hope. Chesky's allowed to keep it. How about if I didn't know it was lost, Chesky picked it up and it just fell out of my pocket? We have a conflict whether or not you could, if the yish, do you have to actually know that you gave up hope or not? This is the text. This is a new Gemara book that we're publishing. I'm releasing hopefully in a couple of days. It's at the printer. Now, if you look at this top image here, this is a timeline. We just released the book on Yeshel Amidas. If you look at this timeline here, 1 o'clock, I'm doing the cursor. This guy drops an object. The finder picks it up at 2 o'clock. The guy who lost it didn't know that he lost it yet. He realizes at 4 o'clock on the homebound bus that he lost his object. That's the question. He picked it up before he gave up. Look how this changes completely. Just a simple timeline. This particular, we made about 30 of these throughout the parak, this topic, to help the learners, highlighting the different parts of the Gemara, taking a chumash and again, a lot of the teachers in Rabbeim are doing amazing